All right, Secretary, really nice to be with you. I've got one specific thing, and then I want to talk some big picture about your department and your tour and things like that across the country. But we've been reporting a lot at Breitbart about the public service loan forgiveness, and it seems like there's a lot of states suing the Trump administration because you guys want to put a stop to it being used for illegal activities, terrorism and the like. This is the most surreal story to me, and we've been reporting on it a lot. Could you comment on this? Because it seems like a real trap they're falling into, but I don't understand it completely.
Well, I'm not quite sure why anyone would think that public service loans would be forgiven for organizations that are, as you described, linked to terrorism, etc. But we are in the process of really totally reviewing all of the, all of the loans, and so we're putting good programs into place. We know that, when you've got $1.7 trillion in debt from student loans, we should resume our collection activities. During the past administration, the Biden administration absolutely confused borrowers. Why would they have been repaying their loans when they thought they were going to be forgiven? And there were several steps they tried to take, with the courts overturned. But now we're doing it in the correct way. Treasury has resumed the collection of defaulted loans, and so far we're up over $200 million in collections.
So what was the purpose of this program initially? Because it seems like something that's supposed to be for people who are doing really noble work on behalf of the country, and then it's being clearly manipulated. What's the nature of the program's origin, and how is it being used now?
Public service loans, I think, clearly for teachers and for first responders and those, that is an exchange of service for the loan, and I think that's right.
And so, that makes perfect sense. But then how does that program get applied to people who could be engaged in anything illegal or even terrorism adjacent?
Well, I certainly don't think it should be.
And it feels like that's what it...
And I think that's what we're trying to accomplish. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, so the Biden administration abused the program quite a bit.
They did.
What were some of the details there?
Well, as I mentioned before, they just kept it confused. They kept saying, well, we're going to forgive these loans if you did this, or if you're going to, certain years have gone by, we're going to forgive these loans. And it just, it was wrong. I mean, these are people who borrowed money and they just weren't paying it back. And there was no reason for them not to pay it back. So let's make sure that those people who can pay and were not part of a legitimate public service forgiveness program pay back their loans, and that's what we're doing.
So I want to talk about loans in the context of the affordability discussion, which has been huge. And a lot of people, I think, my age, I'm about to turn 40, and younger, feel like we're very heavily burdened by loans. And this is something that it's a short-term and long-term problem, and I want to get your thoughts on it in both directions. Short-term, what do we make of the fact that this is just such a huge area where younger people are deeply indebted, and they didn't get a lot out of their education in a lot of cases? And what's the administration's kind of philosophy on that, and what's the plan to make sure that we don't repeat this cycle?
Well, I think we have to look broadly over the whole education experience, the higher education experience, and what these student loans are going for. And I think that's one of the things that the President tried to correct in the Big Beautiful Bill. He capped loans. He took away some of the loans that had been accessible. And when you think about the fact that a university could just simply say, this is how much it costs to come and get this program, and then a student could borrow that amount. What incentive is there for colleges and universities then to reduce their cost? What is the opposite incentive? It is to raise their costs. And if the costs go up every single year, well, the loan's just available to borrow. And so we had to stop that and put some caps on that. And I think that's one of the things. But we also have to, I think, look at education differently, our whole culture of education today. And that is, I don't think everyone needs a four-year college education. And heretofore, years and years ago, it was just thought that, if you wanted to go to a trade school, if you wanted to learn how to be an electrician or a plumber, or even today's world going directly into technology, it was almost a default position because you weren't ready for college or you couldn't make it in college. We have to change that thinking, because today we have many jobs that are available for our skilled workforce, about 700,000 openings in skilled workforce. And so students can go right into those kind of programs with community colleges or trade schools and get into the economy and start making money for themselves. They might use that money that they're making to go on to school if they want to do that at a later time, or they can start their own business, or they can continue working, with a company with that skill trade. So this is not a default position. This is an absolute great job. Do you know that the fastest rising millionaire class in the country are our trades?
That's amazing.
And so let's take a look at that. And so the whole goal of going to college, and please don't misunderstand, I am very happy for people to go to college, and those who can go to college. And there are some of our careers that really require that. If you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, all of that. But you can really have a great life and do something that you thoroughly enjoy, and not have to spend 4 years, in college to do that.
And even professions like journalism, which some people might consider it a prestige profession. We've got people on our staff who went to Harvard or double Harvard, and others who didn't go to college for a minute. And it's there are ways to do certain things without being dependent on that 4-year degree.
Yeah.
But I know how the universities are going to react. If more Americans take your advice, and I agree with your advice, and start looking at trades, then they're just going to try to import more people from overseas who are willing to pay full freight and to keep their prices high. And I feel like the administration's position on this, I feel like I can't always keep up with it. What is the thoughts on foreigners coming in to patronize our universities?
Well, first of all, let me step back from your premise for a minute, that if we don't allow these people to go to college, et cetera, that there won't be enough. There are already colleges and universities that are seeing their enrollment decline. Over 500,000, I think.
Wow.
That we're seeing a decline in college university enrollments, and so that it's a real issue because colleges aren't delivering, and I think that's a real point. But also, we have to think about what are the careers that we want to be available, and let's start in middle school and high school, finding out what kids have interest in and directing them in their pathways towards their career. And then they can determine, are they going to go to a 4-year school? Are they going to go then into a community college? And look, I've been touring the country. I've been touring all 50 states, looking at different universities, different schools, how they operate. And it's really amazing to see the connection that's now being made in many, many communities between high schools and community colleges. There are kids that are graduating from high schools that already have a certificate from a community college. They can go right to work when they graduate from high school. And I think that's what we have to look at. How are the many, many ways to get our this generation of kids prepared to be successful with a career?
That's exactly where I wanted to go next. So I just want you to speak directly to younger people when everyone's feeling the pinch, especially just getting out of either high school or college or going into the working world. Feels like costs are very high for life. What are your recommendations? I tell you what, my first one would be create a culture of you're working. Even if you're in college, you're working. You've got a job. You're working on those skills.
Sure.
But what is your recommendation?
Do you know, I was at a roundtable discussion this morning, and there was a gentleman there who represented one of the universities in Texas, and he was saying, we have kept our costs so low, that the cost of a year of college is between $6,000 and $7,000, and so therefore the students who are going there can actually get a job during the summer and work during the summer and make enough money if they save pretty well to put themselves through the next year or the first semester of the next college. And that's kind of the goal of that university, is to make sure that there is the opportunity for students to be able to put themselves through schools, like what you just said, working where you're in college.
Yeah.
But if the cost of college is $100,000, you can't work enough hours during the summer, or if you've got a full-time job, to pay for that. And I think part of what we want to make sure students understand is, what is their ROI on going to college?
Yes.
And parents have to look at that. Parents have to look at, okay, this is what this university is going to cost for me to send my child there. This is the career that they're looking for. This is the degree that they're getting. What will that degree deliver for them? What is the average return on investment? Can they make enough money so that they're not going into their years in Social Security repaying their loan?
That's such a fundamental point, and it really is not discussed that much culturally, I think, for younger people to know that, you need to have a sense of, if you choose a certain career path, there's a big payday at the end. Another career path, there might not be as big of a payday.
That's exactly
and it
right.
might be more expensive to get certified for that career.
That's exactly right.
It just, so we need to have those conversations. Okay, so
please, one of the things
is,
I think is educating parents about the investment that they're making in whether it's whether it's a community college or a vocational school, or whether their child is going on to a university, is understanding what that potential for that child is, and so they can counsel their child. One of the things that we are looking at in terms of the student loan program with the FAFSA application for student loans, and that is building in a segment that will actually counsel to say, this is what the cost for this program is at this university, this is what the average pay is for this particular job. This is another university that offers a very similar program at a difference in cost. That'll be something that'll be very helpful for parents.
You mentioned your 50-state tour. We've been tracking it at Breitbart. Can you tell us some more about it?
Yeah, we've been to about 14 states so far, and I've been to, my goal in going on this 50-state tour is really to see what is happening with education throughout our states. I've visited elementary schools, started some preschools. I've been to, there was a school that's out on Long Island called, it's called the Schoolhouse, and it's a micro school. It's like the one-room schoolhouse. That's one version of how education is changing. I've been to religious schools, I've been to charter schools, I've been to private schools, and just to see how are they looking at their curriculum, how are they teaching it differently. I was in Austin, Texas at the Alpha School, which teaches its first 2 hours every day strictly through AI. And it's amazing to see in that school how then they spend the next 6 hours of the day, or 5 hours, ever how long they're there, then putting those concepts that they've learned into practical use.
Wow.
So it's incredible, just to see the different forms. So my goal will be, as I step away from this job, and as the president has said, if I'm successful, I'll be firing myself.
Yes.
But as I do that, to make sure that we have compiled from this tour and looking at all these different schools, a toolkit, for lack of a better term, a toolkit of best practices of what I have seen around the country to be able to offer to states, to their superintendents or to their governors, etc., to say these are the things that are happening. They are not originating in Washington at the Department of Education. They are originating in your other states around the country. The Miracle of Mississippi, which the Mississippi Miracle it was called, and it was returning the science of reading into classrooms, learning how to read phonetically, which is the way a great deal of people in the country learned to read years ago. And what we've seen is then their reading scores are going up. And Louisiana adopted it, Iowa adopted it, Florida has adopted it. Governors get competitive, and state chiefs get competitive, and that's what it ought to be.
What are some of the highlights for you that you've seen so far in terms of either approach or any states that are really stand out to you? What have you been learning?
Those states that I just mentioned, what we've seen is their NAEP scores, which is our national report card. I think what really rang so true with the president is right after he took office, the NAEP scores came out, and they come out every other year. The NAEP scores came out and showed, this was the most astounding thing to him. I remember how shocked he was, that only about 30 to 35% of 12th graders, 8th graders, and 4th graders are proficient in reading or in math. That is an astonishingly low number. And up through 3rd grade, you're learning to read. But from 3rd grade on, you're reading to learn. And if you cannot read proficiently, you cannot be successful, and you cannot learn. So we have to reverse that course. We have to have students reading proficiently, not at 30 to 35%.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned firing yourself. This is the exciting one. So you've got a very interesting job in that you've been tasked with dismantling the Department of Education. I know there's executive orders, there's a pending legislation that's getting held up in the Senate, I think in the HELP committee, which is ironic. But so give me the process and what step are you on, and then what are the next steps to come?
So the president's goal really is to return education to the states. He believes, as I do, the best education is that closest to the child, that is being supervised by their parents, by teachers, by school superintendents, by the governors in those states. So in order to take the programs that are within the Department of Education. And let's remember, the Department of Education wasn't stood up until 1980. Prior to that, there was no Department of Education. Since it's been stood up, we have spent $3 trillion on education in our country, and the scores have continued to go down. And so we're clearly doing something wrong. So the president does not believe that we need this bureaucracy of a huge building and other buildings across the country to have education be better, because it's not working the way it is. So basically what the Department of Education services as today is a pass-through from funds that are appropriated by Congress. And sure, there are grant money that comes in, states compete for the grants, Department of Education makes some of those decisions and sends the money out, but that can be done in other agencies that have expertise in those areas as well, even more expertise than a Department of Education would have. There's always concern, and the first question that comes to me is, well, children with special needs, the IDEA funding, we're afraid that that's going to be interrupted or not go to the states. Well, that was going to the states before there was a Department of Education. So was Title I funding, which was for our economically poorer areas, around the country. That money's going to continue to flow because Congress passes that legislation and then appropriates that money that's going to go wherever those programs will reside after we take them out of the Department of Education. So what we're doing today, and this is the program that I call a proof of concept program. We've signed, they're called interagency agreements. They're used by all of the agencies throughout government. You're almost contracting, if you will, with an agency to do a portion of your work. So we are taking those programs on a proof of concept basis out of the Department of Education. I've signed, we signed the first one with the Department of Labor. We've put it there. So part of the staff goes over with the program. They work with staff from the Department of Labor, and we make sure that it's fully integrated. We are going to show that it will be successful, and we'll take that back to Congress. Congress will have to vote to put it there permanently. And but I am very confident. We're very selective about the people that are chosen. We're very thoughtful about the process, working very closely with our Secretary of Labor, Ori Chavez-DeRaymer, who is very anxious to bring on these programs into the Department of Labor. She believes that they will be as or more effective and successful putting them in the Department of Labor. So we've signed 6 new ones, 2 more with Labor, 2 with HHS, 1 with the Department of the Interior, and 1 with the Department of State. So they're just beginning now. It takes a while to formulate them, to negotiate with the agency, to put it in place, and to detail those employees over to that agency to fully integrate, and keeping Congress informed all along the way. I stay in close contact, with Senator Cassidy, who was the chair of the HELP Committee, with Chairman Walberg at the House. They knew exactly what we were doing. I've talked to many of our senators and congressmen already about this is the program that we're putting in place. We know we have to have congressional support. Mm-hmm. We want the transparency, with Congress to do this. It's a win-win.
I can't help but ask about the shutdown. What did you learn about your department during the shutdown?
That it didn't impact schools at all.
Wow.
School buses ran on time. Kids went to school. Teachers got paid. Lunches were served in the lunch. All of those good things that happen in schools, continued to happen. Anything that was under the Department of Education was not impacted at all.
Okay, 2 questions remaining for now. The AI, you mentioned AI. Do you see AI as a threat to education or as an enhancement potentially, and what's your overall thinking on that?
Listen, AI needs to have guardrails about how it is utilized, but I have seen it be like an individual tutor for a child. Yeah. So it enhances, handled properly, it can certainly enhance, that school experience for a child. I mean, you can't have one-on-one instruction with every student in a class, but if there is an AI program that a teacher's monitoring, they're watching, but an AI program, and I've watched this happen, senses when a student is falling a little bit behind. They can then resubmit that content to that student in a slightly different way, so the student makes sure to grasp that information before they go on to the next chapter or whatever it is. And so I've seen it work incredibly well to the benefit of those children.
Last one, Secretary. I think you probably spend most of your time thinking on behalf of the administrators and the teachers, but as a parent who patronizes the school system, what's your message to us, like to make sure that our kids are getting the most out of their education right now? Anything that you thought of fresh since you've been in this job for parents?
Be involved. Be involved. Go to your school board meetings. Help elect your school board members. And if they're appointed, run for it, yourself. But stay in touch with teachers. Be involved in that curriculum. Don't just show up on the day when you're getting the report. It's the parent-teacher conference to hear how your child is doing, because that's not the time for it. Maybe the first one to hear where your child might need a little bit of help, or glowing reports of how well your child is doing. But be involved in your child's education. I cannot emphasize enough that parents are the best ones to help direct and guide their children in the educational process.
Amen to that. Well, thanks for all the time today, and best of luck putting yourself out of a job.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.